Herzlich willkommen. Es ist wunderbar, dass wir heute Abend alle hier sind. Es ist ein sehr besonderer Moment. Ich bin immer hier für die Bedankung-Moment. So, sorry, ein bisschen langweilig, aber wichtig für uns. So, am ersten vielen Dank an unsere Unterstützer. Das Staatsministerium für Wissenschaft und Kunst, die Alexander-Tutzek-Stiftung, die Freunde Haus der Kunst. Natürlich vielen Dank an Cecilia Vicuña und Sandra Vásquez de la Horra sowie an Salta Art für die Zusammenarbeit und die Unterstützung, die dieses Gespräch im Kontext der Ausstellung ermöglicht hat. Vielen Dank und vielen Dank natürlich besonders an Agustina Strückmann und das Team von Salta Art, unser Team, Jana Baumann, vielen Dank für die Arbeit seit sehr, sehr lange. Das war ein Traum vor schon viele Monaten und es ist eigentlich eine Realität geworden. Andrea Sau, die das Abend organisiert hat, und Marlene Mützel. Vielen Dank. Es ist wunderbar, dass ihr alle mit uns seid, unser Team zu zelebrieren. Wir sind eigentlich sehr, sehr froh, liebe Cecilia, ich kann vielleicht auf Englisch sprechen. Cecilia, we are very, very happy that you are here with us to celebrate Sandra. We encountered your work in Europe recently only, too recently. I guess many of you have seen the beautiful work you made in Athens for Documenta, and then perhaps some of you have seen the extraordinary Turbine Hall Commission that was made in the aftermath of the COVID pandemic, and have finally encountered a fundamental work that has so many ways to transform how the history of art has been transmitted, and the stereotypes of art history, and bring in other stories, which is what we try to do with our program. Bring in other stories that help seeing art history from a different perspective. And this is a beginning, and it's even more beautiful that you are going to open in less than 2 weeks an exhibition in Rivoli, at Castello di Rivoli, where actually in the same site where La Manica Lunga, where the exhibition of Rebecca Horn that actually Jana Baumann curated was presented 1.5 years ago. This is also to say that the beautiful kinship that exists across institutions normally is in reality the kinship across humans that respect their own work and respect artists and make everything possible to support the work of artists. And speaking about support, there is nothing more touching than the conversation that will take shape now. And I will also thank again Sandra for having made this conversation possible. And we are very, very looking forward to hearing as much as you can share about the many words that you are sharing, and also the many stories that we probably will share. And no one better than Jana Baumann to lead this conversation. So I hand over to you, and thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Good evening, everyone. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you here this evening to hear two voices of extraordinary human beings and artists. We cannot thank you enough, Cecilia, for making the journey to Munich to see the exhibition and to speak with us about significant questions that your both artistic practice raise for our present. So I'd like to briefly introduce you both. To be honest, I find it very difficult to name the media or find the right words to describe the artistic practice for which Cecilia is celebrated internationally. Today, around noon, we were able to experience ourselves during a poetry reading by Cecilia, and everyone in the room felt immediately connected through touch, language, and poetry. So in any case, Cecilia Life's work should be acknowledged. Cecilia Vicuña is a poet, artist, activist, and filmmaker whose work addresses pressing concerns of the modern world including ecological destruction, human rights, and cultural homogenization. Born and raised in Santiago de Chile, she has been in exile since the early 70s after military coup against the President Salvador Allende. And in London, she was a co-founder of Artists for Democracy then in 1974. I think traveling is part of your life, of your practice. You lived in Bogota then and moved in the 1980s to New York, and you lived there since the 1980s. So solo exhibitions of Cecilia Vicuña's work have been organized at a number of major institutions, including most recently, just within the last 4 to 5 years, this is an important fact, at the Museo de Bellas Artes, Santiago de Chile, 23, Tate Modern London, Salomon Guggenheim Museum, New York, Museo del Arte Miguel Urrutia, Bogota, all 22, Centro de Arte dos de Mayo, Madrid, 21, and Museo Universitario de Arte Contemporáneo, Mexico City, 2020. Her work has been featured in numerous group exhibitions, including in Documenta 14, in Essence and Kassel, and the 59th Venice Biennial in 22, and is part of a major museum collections around the world. She's author of more than 30 volumes of art and poetry. Cecilia Vicuña was the winner of the 23 Premio Nacional de Artes Plásticas, one of the most prestigious awards given by her homeland. Cecilia received the Golden Lion for lifetime achievements at the 22 Venice Biennale. Welcome and thank you for being here. Sandra Vásquez de la Horra is born in Viana del Mar, coastal city in Chile in 1967. Her childhood is marked by both the military dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet and her conservative Catholic family background. From a young age, she recognized that supporting the dictatorship is wrong. Her Spanish, Bolivian, and Chilean heritage make her aware of migration and transnational issues from a very young age. Her understanding of the connection between nature, humans, and mythology is awakened of knowledge of her great-grandmother Amalia Aymara, indigenous roots. After the birth of her daughter Clara, Sandra decided to move to Germany in 1995. Her early days in Germany are marked by language barriers, loneliness, racism, and the challenge of balancing her studies with motherhood. Sandra Vásquez de la Horra has been living and working since 2010 in Berlin. The solo exhibition Sandra Vásquez de la Horra, The Awake Vulcanus, traveled from the Denver Art Museum to the Museo Nacional de Bellas Artes, Santiago de Chile, Fundación Malba, Museo de Arte Latinoamérica de Buenos Aires, and the Institute of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles in 24 and 25. The retrospective Soy Energía is the first survey exhibition ever in Germany as well as in Europe. That should make us quiet. Her work has been featured in numerous group exhibitions like Bienal do Mercosul in Porto Alegre in 25 or the 59th Venice Biennale 22. She was honored recently with the Käthe-Kollwitz Prize at Akademie Künste in Berlin. Great that you're here. So we're here tonight to learn and hear from you about how your journey has unfolded, about making art, about valuable knowledge for our souls, our planet, that is being overlooked. So how you found your way and what connects you to. In many past exhibitions or experiences from past exhibitions here at Haus der Kunst, but also through deeply moving accounts of personal experiences which you journalists shared with me, a disturbing pattern emerges of one of voices going unheard. So female artists who were and are not exhibited, who were ignored or treated with hostility. There are countless such stories. How have you experienced this through your long artistic careers, both of you having received so much international attention? But I'm wondering, how did you first hear about each other? And I believe there are significant time gaps in between when you first became aware of another. Maybe you start. I guess you heard earlier about Cecilia, then Cecilia about you, right?
Yes.
Here.
The first time I hear about Cecilia was when I was 19. Nemesio Antunes was director of Museo Bellas Artes in two periods, before dictature and after dictature. And in the time of dictature, I moved to Santiago, to Taller 99, and I was working in prints. The prints are also in the exhibition to see, the ones I have done there. And suddenly he told me was a woman making a huge installation with all the leaves left in the autumn in the forestal park. And then I say, oh, wow, this is brave. And wow, I have never heard something like this. That's great. And in one moment, I forget, of course, you are 19 and you have so much information. Then I come back to Viña del Mar and I went to the library. And in the library was a book named Precarios. And I bought the book. So I began to be familiar with the spirit to do works from very little things, installation with the rest of the things you find in the beach, and also the way to make this poetry of the little things. Thank you, Cecilia. You are a big master. You teach me from this.
For me, to be here in this museum is a very moving thing, and I think it's an example for the world, the fact that you are transforming the legacy of pain and horror that existed here into a future legacy of art, generosity, and solidarity. So I'm very touched that the occasion for that is an exhibition by Sandra. And I can tell you that I never heard about the existence of Sandra, because it's characteristic in Latin America that women don't hear about each other because nobody hears about the women artists. And if it weren't for Nemesio Antunes, who was an extraordinary, exceptional human being, Sandra would never have heard about me either. So the first time I encountered her work was I first met the work, and I saw a little drawing in a group show in Santiago. I believe it was the year 2015, in a new museum called Cerrillos, which used to be the airport when I was a little girl. And I encountered this little drawing, and I looked at it and I thought, my God, this is like a medieval illustration from one of these rotten medieval monsters, you know. And who is doing that? And I begin to see, I couldn't find her name, but I never forgot that drawing, you know. So eventually I discovered Sandra Vásquez de la Horra. And I said, extraordinary name, doesn't sound like a real name. Sandra Vásquez de la Horra, a name as powerful as the drawing. So I never forgot that instant. And so after that, I began to pursue every apparition of Sandra, to discover that she had been a student of two friends of mine who were friends, one of them in the 60s, and she happened to have been a student of them. And so after that, I knew that it was a matter of time for us to find each other. And when I learned that we were both at the Venice Biennale, I ran to see your exhibition. And it was very hard to find because I don't think they had labels or things, and I ran, it was a monster exhibition. And finally you were not there, and I saw your little sort of altar construction, a little bit like the magic home house that is inside the exhibition here, but smaller. And so I felt such reverence for the work that was there that I kneeled down on the floor in gratitude for being a witness of that work. And I asked someone to take a picture to send to you. And so that you would know that that's how I felt.
When I picked you up from the airport, we had a beautiful conversation, and you were telling me a lot about the beginning of your career and how it was for you to start exhibition making. And it still resonates with me, and maybe you can share with the audience a bit more how it was, the beginning, how hard it was. And behind us, we can see one installation view of Sandra's exhibition here, showing her early works, video performances you made during your studies in Düsseldorf, very young, within 1 week, and they were never meant to be seen by public. They telling us also about this hard time you went through. And Cecilia, you told me, I don't remember exactly if it was really your first exhibition ever, but there were energies who, in the end, put you to the hallway with your exhibition instead of the proper exhibition rooms or gallery rooms. And Marlene and we hardly tried to find this little pic, and I promise I'm going to find it in the near future. But we couldn't make it until today because it's so hard. And you mentioned they tried to erase you from the history of the institution. This is why we have this white frame. Maybe you can share the story.
Okay, so when I was a young girl, I was always doing art because I grew up in a family of artists that had been artists for many generations, and 3 generations of my family had been persecuted by the different governments that and the different revolutions that had taken place in Chile. So I grew up with this notion that art was something so sacred, especially for people who are persecuted, and this sense of reverence for what art is. And I have this memory of being like still in my old force when I was just crawling on the floor like a little baby, and my grandmother, who was a wonderful sculptor in clay, would just hand me little pieces of clay for Cecilia to be forming little creatures and so forth. So by the time I was like in my early 20s, 21, 22, I believe, something like that, suddenly Nemesio Antunes, the person that Sandra mentioned, he was an artist who had become the director of the National Museum of Fine Arts in Santiago, and he showed up on television saying, now the National Museum will cease to be a mausoleum for the 19th century and it will be open to young artists. Soon enough, I showed up there and I said to Nemesio, nobody stopped me, no secretaries. I just walked into his office, very unusual these days, but back then it was possible. And he said, who are you? Cecilia Vicuña. I have read your poetry. He had read my poetry. And nobody in Chile had read my poetry. Well, very well. What do you want? To fill the museum with autumn leaves? He said, let me think about it. A few days later, he called and said, yes, you can fill, but only 1 gallery. Okay, very good. I did that, and there was a political assassination the day before the opening. Therefore, that exhibition didn't exist on a public sphere. And I really did fill out 1 gallery with autumn leaves with the help of the gardeners. So move forward to that. This exhibition, the existence of this exhibition was only mentioned in Chile by an art critic or historian 30 years later in 1 phrase this long. So that shows you the reception for women artists in Chile and Latin America. And then I am in London, and that's the Otoño, yeah. And many years later, this photos showed up. This exhibition happened in 1971. In any case, the story that you wanted to hear is I am now in London, and I had a grant from the British Council, a scholarship was called, and I researched London, what is the best museum here? I was 24, and I had no idea that women were not allowed, much less Latin American women. I was completely ignorant and naive, totally naive. So I discovered this is the best museum, the Institute of Contemporary Art. And I presented the project of an exhibition. And the director happened to be Sir Roland Penrose, a great genius. And he called me, said, come talk to me, and said, look, everybody, the directors here, the directors of the art gallery, hate your work. They don't want you to show here. But I love it. Your work is great, but I can only offer you the hallway to the bathroom. And I said, fantastic, I love to have the exhibition on the hallway to the bathroom. That was the beginning.
Thank you so much. We already learned about your first encounters, and I would like to know what fascinates you about Cecilia's art. What is visionary about it for you?
I think it's the poetry and the essential. It's to find the sense to be in this world, and this is very reflected in the way, like, to work with these precarios to make art of the rest of things are in the beach. We played this game like kids, and we find everything in the beach, shells and little wood and leaves, and then she was doing like little altars. And this, when we are kids, we play a lot to do some caves, and this is a playful way to make an installation. And she make from very immaterial thing art, what I think it's fantastic, because have to do with the ritual and to be connect with the earth. And it's such an incredible thing, like you have your own way to find this connection with the world, and everything is speaking with you. Every little thing is speaking with you. And then I say, it's like this little world, like from Homo Ludens perspective, is like reinventing the art, like to say no to what the society want to have, this expensive, valuable, and will last forever. With this precarious will be only this moment, and this photo will be made from this moment, and then will disappear. And this makes me so much sense in a world so full of objects and heavy things. I say, we will disappear. Our existence is so little. We are in this world, and make me so much sense because Cecilia is a thinker. And I have a big respect with someone think more like, out of the ego of, I will make here the great thing. No, have to do with another view, another perspective, something so deep, and this impressed me.
Behind me, we can see installation shots of your presentations at the Venice Biennial in 22. There were many artists presented who have a deep connection. The energy is really important to artists, and also spiritual moments. And what did you take from this Biennale with you? How was it for you to be there and meet the artists?
Well, first of all, Cecilia Alemani, I believe, and you correct me, was the first woman to be an Italian woman, the curator. And when she was named, Cecilia called me and said, tell me that she wanted for me to be part of that, the Venice Biennale. The last thing I ever imagined is that I would be part of the Venice Biennale, because that was so contrary to the experience I have had up to that moment. You know, always being disregarded for either being a woman or a Latin woman, or even an artist or a poet is something that you experience so intensely and continually in this world. And so when Cecilia presented this idea, just the very idea was like a dream. And we began this conversation, and I immediately remembered that when I was a young girl, perhaps 12, 13, 14 years old, my father noticed that I was always reading, and that I was reading all kinds of books. So he subscribed me to this extraordinary magazine that I see that is still being published by UNESCO, and The Courier is called. And one of the couriers that I received was devoted to Venice. And Venice had been flooded for the first time in a brutal way, and was like an image of the future, Venice under the water. So when Cecilia invited me, the first thing I thought was my memory of Venice underwater. So that's how I created the installation. I immediately said, I will work with the universe under the lagoon. And so I learned about the fishermen. I learned that Venice was born out of the ancient Neolithic fishermen that inhabited the lagoon. And so is the majestic nature of the lagoon that speaks to me. And I requested that the fishermen and the people living around the lagoon gather debris for me. And when I arrived at the installation, I had a mountain almost 3 meters tall of the debris that the people around the lagoon gathered. So what did I gather from the experience of the Venice Biennale? I had never been in a Venice Biennale, and probably I never will go to another Biennale in Venice. And it was COVID time, so we couldn't visit each other. It was prohibited to go because everybody was afraid of catching the disease. And so it was a great mystery to know what the other artists were doing. And I was only able to see some of the Biennale on opening days because before we had not been allowed. And the few things that I saw, including Sandra, including Violeta Parra, is I wonder if there has ever been another Biennale that had such a presence of unwanted people like this Biennale was. And each one was more masterful than the next. So that's what I took in, the incredible emotion of the mastery that Cecilia Alemani had achieved with her creation of that Biennale.
Here we can see especially the left image installation shots of your retrospective here at Haus der Kunst. On the left we can see a section of early works which have never been shown to public before this show. And it features also landscapes which you made when you were a teenager. We can see fusion of animals, humans and plants. So I'm wondering if you can share a bit more how you first came in contact with nature in your childhood, and when and how organic connection to nature arised for you.
When I began to walk, I was in Cárcamo, is playing the Cordillera de los Andes, and I learned to walk, and I disappeared, and my parents didn't know where I was, and everyone was looking at where is Sandra, and then they find me with a pig. I went that the pig had babies, and then I went inside and I was another baby with a pig, so sleeping with the pigs together. So they find me there. And so I think, and all the time I have this so incredible contact with the animals. I was one more. So I have not feel different than a chicken or a pig. I was always around, and for me it was the more natural thing of the world to be part of all this. For this reason, we grow up not so going to the supermarket, we go to pick up the eggs and we do ourselves. And when you grow up in the nature, is totally different. And I was riding horses in the mountain. So I have been in this contact, had been a big physical thing also, working very hard, because to be a lot of months in the countryside, you need to really move your body. And for survive there, you really need to to make your own food. It's totally different like the life we have in the cities now. And it's a big teaching also, because you need to have such an incredible discipline to wake up in the morning and to stand up with the sun and to do it. And this, for me, was essential, because even I become, in my teenager time, an intellectual, and I began to read a lot, I have in my body been to pick up the honey of the bees and being bitten everywhere. So it's a time where I have been in contact with the bees, and after I was using the material of the bees also. So to begin to be an alchemist, begin to take the material with your own hands. And this have been in my very early years. I feel very thankful about. I was swimming in the river. I think it's a wonderful publication of Salta Foundation, where is the photos of my father when he was a kid, being with his mother, with my grandmother, in the river, in the Yapel River. And then it's all this, another kind of contact with nature, another kind of life where we don't have anymore, where the people, it's very unique to go and to get this contact in the nature so strong. After I have this meeting with the shaman from Cuba, and I learned about all these orishas and all the power they have, and the orisha of the river is Ochun. And I understand a lot more, because Yoruba is such an ancestral, incredible culture, and the mythology is so complex, and the oracles are numerological in a way nobody can understand, how the people can make all this combinatory, even more complex than I Ching. What I Ching is already, for me, a very complex with the hexagrams and the way to read this oracle. And all the ways the oracle have, and all the relation with the elements, it's in a way, I talk with a shaman about this, as a parallel world between the Buddhism, and between I Ching and the Yoruba interpretation, because they have the elements. It's a lot of parallel worlds.
I mean, in unexpected ways, both of you make knowledge as well as energy visible and physically tangible, and allowing us to experience, I would say, given connections and make us communicating with the earth, the elements, the nature, and its creatures again. So this is something very special. There's a beautiful work by you, and I would love to get to know a bit more how your connection has developed from an early age on to nature, and how you find your materials.
It's wonderful to hear Sandra, because Sandra is maybe like 20 years or more, younger than me. And it's a wonderful thing that even 20 years after I was born, it was still possible to experience what you experienced. Now go back to the 40s and 50s when I was a little girl, and I grew up in a completely wild way until I was like about 9 years old. And just like you, I mean, my mother, I always tell this story, my mother is indigenous, even though she didn't know it. So she thought that the clothes was detrimental for young kids. So the minute the sun was out, everybody naked, barefoot and naked. So that's the photos of my early childhood, everybody naked. I mean, the kids, not the grown-ups, the kids. And so you can imagine experiencing the world with your bare foot and with your bare bodies is the most wonderful gift ever. The second gift was that because life was considered to be safe. Can you imagine that now everybody's afraid? You see babies this size, they already have a helmet and so forth. There's a culture of fear that the kids are going to get hurt. That didn't exist when I was a little girl. Goodbye, my darling, that was here. And be left all day alone in the forest or anywhere. And of course, our friends were the animals. And just like you, nobody told us that these are animals, my darling. These were our friends, our companions. And so we learned everything from the animals, from the wind, from the sun. And so that work happened when I had just finished high school. I was 17 years old, and I was admitted to architecture school. And in the interim between finishing the school in December and entering the university in March, it was in January of the year 66 that I was imagining that I would be an architect. So I was eyeing all this little debris in the beach and looking at its incredible beauty. And then I am one day half naked in those tiny bikinis that we wore at the time. And there's a very strong cold wind in the South Pacific where I was. And I turned around, like the wind was not just passing, but was going like around my body like that. So I turned around to see, what are you doing, wind? And the wind responds to me not in words, but in absolute delight, as there had been a sort of mutual recognition. And I looked up and I see the light, I see the sun, I see the ocean, and I understood in that moment something that changed my life forever, which is that I was being felt the same I was feeling. And that every moment I stepped on the ground was feeling me, and the waves were feeling me and all that. So I fell to the ground in reverence, in awe of the beauty of existence. And that was the moment when I picked up my first debris, and I knew exactly what to do. And I planted it for the waves to erase. And so I'm always asked, where does that work exist? All those first works, there were no photos. This was a little later. It was just me and the ocean, me and the sun. So where do those works exist? They exist in the quality of the relationship, in the mutual awareness, the awareness of everything that lives and your own awareness are in an exchange. And this is what keeps life going. The mutual sensitivity, the reciprocal relationship with each other. So when people ask me about nature, nature is a Western word. For nature itself, we are nature. All our bacteria, all our hair, the moisture in our eyes comes from the sea. There's no separation. And that is the origin of not just my art, but it's the origin of all art, especially if you go back to times before the most recent 5,000 years.
Yeah, and here behind me we can see also pictures by a very important installation you exhibited at the Documenta in Kassel, but also in Athens. And I'm wondering, maybe you can share a bit more knowledge about this piece, how it works for you, and how important the material is and the interaction with human beings as a part of the work.
Well, when I was a teenager, as I already mentioned, I was a very curious girl, needed to see and read everything. And I encountered a book of pre-Columbian art at the home of an aunt of mine who was a great sculptor, Rosa Vicuña was her name. And there I saw a khipu. Khipu means knot in Quechua. And it was just a bunch of threads. And I didn't study anything about the khipu. The khipu was not mentioned in school, was not in any museum. The khipu was like a non-existent thing, but for some reason, the young girl really was touched, deeply touched by those bunch of threads with knots. So the khipu began to appear in my poetry, and then you fast forward to a lifetime of dedication to the khipu, the concept of the khipu. And when I was invited to join Documenta 14, this was a few years before the Biennale of Venice. This was in the year 2017. And it was also a huge rarity that one of the curators that was working for Documenta, Dieter Rolsrate is his name, from Belgium, philosopher, poet, curator. He discovered my work in Rio de Janeiro and went to Chile and met me, and he said, yes, you have to be doing that. So when I was already in Athens, I suddenly remembered that I loved, when I was a little girl, one image from the Cretan women in a fresco in Knossos. And I looked that up while I was in Athens, and I saw that image for the first time in color. And this amazing lady that is called La Parisienne, you can look her up, it's a very famous ancient fresco. And this Parisienne lady was not only the most beautiful woman I had ever seen in my life, but she had a huge knot, red knot, which in my childhood I had seen in black and white. No way, I thought it was her hair. Big, moño, how you call that? Bun, like that. No bun, it was just a sacred red knot. And so I knew that I had to do a khipu that would join the ancient tradition of the Cretan women weavers who were amazing, liberated women before patriarchy took over the Mediterranean world. And it also connected to the indigenous women that created the khipu, and this is my personal view, that the khipu had to be created by women because it's a tactile kind of a sculpture that only exists in relation. It exists in relation to the body. When you touch the threads, you have to tie them, you have to untie them, you have to consider them in a space. That's why I call it a poem in space. And so last thing is that this was the sculpture. It was almost 10 meters tall. And then the sculpture it manifested also as these performances. So we went to the Mediterranean Ocean to deliver the offering to the Mediterranean Sea that had caused us to be there. And then in Kassel, I did also a performance connected to the river. And then in the Documenta Halle, we brought in the river, and the material that you ask is I began using unspun wool because from the perspective of the Andean weavers, unspun wool is the origin of life, is the origin of life in the cosmic gas, in the intergalactic space. And you wonder, how did the ancient weavers know that? because recent astronomy has discovered that that's exactly the case, that life originates in the intergalactic dust, where cosmic gas interacts in such a manner that what we call matter, what we call planets and galaxies, are born.
The sister of your mom was a nun, and you got introduced to ancestral and indigenous knowledge through your great grandmother. And what would you say? How can protect ancestral or indigenous knowledge? How can it change our future or also protect us? Maybe you can share a bit more how important indigenous knowledge is for you in your work.
We have suffered the education of the colonialism. We have suffered to don't know our roots. We are working to give light to our ancestry and to put the names of them in our memories, and to don't say they have not exist, they exist. They are our guardians. They are working with us. We don't have nothing to hide. The way they make us to be always proud to the European part is a very heavy thing. We need to assume this is a total brainwashing, and the knowledge of the indigenous, of the people of the earth, like in Chile and they try to erase. We never have education about this. Nobody told us. And we begin to go to places like Museum of Art Precolombino to get conscious about what was going on with these people. And we begin to try to find in our roots where we are coming from. And we have memories. We have memories of the nomadies. We have memories of we have been these people also. And they wanted to erase us. So the heritage we try to bring is to put together this and to give light. We need to find us and to find our mirrors to heal. And we are working every time to be more conscious and to be part of this earth and to have respect and to be this philosophy. When we read about Selknam, they never make trash. They use everything what they catch. That was amazing. When they catch something, every part was used. And this is something we need to learn. What is civilization? What means civilization? We live in governments where it's not democracy. Which one have choose to go to wars? You have choose to go to the war? Nobody of you have choose to go to the war. So we are looking to make sense to our life. Artists are thinkers, not only producers of objects. We need to go in these thinkers. We want to change something in this world. For this reason, I'm very thankful to be in dialogue with my friend, Cecilia Vicuña.
So both of you have consistently shown solidarity with others, with communities, artist friends, and taking an active stance in a wide variety of situations. So would you say that art as a form of communication has never lost its power for you and can always bring light to us, also in dark times?
Yes, I think that is true. I was saying earlier that I learned from my family, from my grandfather and my grandmother. My grandfather was put in prison 4 times in his life. He was a writer, he was a professor at the university, he was even a member of the parliament at some point. but he believed above all in civil liberties, and he believed that dissent was sacred. And he, as a lawyer, for example, he was the lawyer that defended Pablo Neruda when Neruda was persecuted. So I learned from my family that this sense of solidarity with one another was the main value of life. And that no matter how horrible the times can be and how difficult and how much persecution there can be, in the end is the care for each other, the support for each other. And the supreme form of that care was art. How did my family come to that? Is because generation after generation, this family produced artists, philosophers, poets, writers, sculptors, musicians, all of them. And so this sense that art is like the art and poetry, of course, and thought, as Sandra was saying, is like the web of life itself. So there's not the web of life that you read about in biology and art, but the two are entwined. If we can feel that, then art becomes of a crucial importance for humanity, because art is the one realm that not education, colonization, wars has never been able to domesticate or rule. Still, each person that experiences art experiences it in its own terms. And that freedom to experience, feel, sense, and know what you're feeling and sense is what art provides. So I never saw a separation between art and revolution, between art and politics. Just to know your own feelings and your own thoughts is the most political art, is the most political act. How can that not be something that we are all aware of? It's that our own awareness is the treasure that we have all received from a few million years of evolution. So I think that is what your art. I enter here the exhibition of Sandra, and the emotion I feel is a radical emotion of recognition. The force of her work is the force of the volcanoes, is the force that every woman experiences in herself when a woman is liberated to feel who she really is. So I think humanity is so far away from what humanity can be and really is. And it's for us, the women, precisely because we're ignored and persecuted, that we can still feel how unfair this injustice is, because we are preventing ourselves from being completely joyful all the time, or most of the time at least. And this is what art has given me, and this is what I feel in the presence of your art. I feel the power of this force that is liberated once you admit the pain, once you admit the truth of being.
Thank you so much, both to you. Thank you. So we're happy to take up to 3 questions. Are there any questions?
Hello. If I may ask you both a question. In your art, we see the reflection of your life, your culture, and we learn a lot from your art about how you grew up. And I wanted to ask, in your life, you have encountered with a lot of artists from other countries and other cultures, and perhaps which artist's story told through this artist's art impressed you the most? So you met a particular artist and you thought, okay, through the art of this artist, I understand and I see something that I never knew before.
Thank you. That's a beautiful question and a good one. I personally adore the art of all cultures. And I was lucky enough to live in a family that had libraries with books from art from India, from Italy. For example, my grandmother, she was surrounded by Madonnas from the pre-Renaissance in Italy. If you look at my paintings, you see that I was watching that when I was a little girl. I also adored Persian art. I also adore Paleolithic art. So there isn't any era or any part of the world that I haven't really revered and learned from. As for my own liberation as an artist, I was passionate, of course, of poetry above everything else. And as a poet, the poetry of the encounter that emerged in Germany when the German romantic poets that I see all over the place, Hölderlin, Novalis, and so forth, they encountered the ancient cultures of Asia, and that liberated them from the oppression of the Western mind. And so I read that as a teenager. So all those poets, no matter from where, they always have one thing in common with the fact that this poetry and this art was something that was sublime and always connected to the divine. It didn't matter that it was what religion. It was not about religion. It's about what we in our language call the divine manifestation of life itself. So I couldn't say which artist. Of course, I have my favorites. I cry in front of, let's see, a Giotto or a Masaccio or a Piero della Francesca, since I have here an Italian friend. And I'm headed to Italy tomorrow. And to me, that is the emotion I learned from my grandmother. You know, so it is the emotion that art transmits that is boundless. And it's present in all the cultures.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. I got to spend a bit of the day with you guys today. And I want to ask both of you, having learned about your career and your practice, how would you encourage a young artist from the so-called global South, global majority, to persevere and continue? What gave you the courage to continue living in Germany, living in New York, in London, where you constantly othered, even now, constantly excluded? How would you encourage someone to continue no matter what and to just make?
You are the age of my daughter, and you are incredible artist and so conscious. It's incredible, like a big blessing to have you here. And the love, I feel this love is what moves everything. And I think Cecilia agree, we are doing our practice out of love. Like Fabian is cooking out of love. I cook a lot because it's like a therapy for me. Make me so happy to be cooking. And you do things out of love. What you do about when you don't do things out of love, what you are doing things for yourself and you are taking care. It's like when you love yourself better, you can love the persons around you, your family, your kids, your friends, and you create community and you create solidarity and you grow together. And even if one person believes in you, this becomes your friend, your super incredible friend that once believed in you, like Jana believed in you, have been a peace in your life. And make the difference to have someone can look so cool, but she goes so deep. And this makes the difference. Like, what we are in this world to learn from each other is the more precious thing. We are learning all the time from each other. And this is the reason we are in this world. It's not superstars. Because if a superstar is superego also, it's more about, I met you. You are in my heart, and I appreciate to have met you, Elena. And this is the more important thing. And we are raising stars here. Our existence is so little in this world, and we want to connect. I want to connect. I want to really feel I'm a human being, have been really deeply human, understanding, hearing, and being in the togetherness. And to feel we are not alone. Even you feel, a lot of time, we feel, oh, we are outsider, we don't fix here, we are not part of the, you feel reject. And you say what you feel, when you are staying in Germany, if Germany is a tough place to be. It's a really hard place to be, because people is so afraid to show their heart, to open their heart. They are so afraid to be themselves. And to say, you know what? Tell me the truth, where you are. Where is your heart? Open more the heart. And this is what I think. I have wonderful friends. And I have the more stubborn ones. The ones nobody wants to have. And then I persist to have these friends. And they say, why you can be so good friend of this grumpy opa? And I say, because I learned a lot with this grumpy opa. And this is the thing. We need to take out a lot of mask and be ourselves, be honest and connect, and really try to connect. And don't become the idiot of the internet and the mobile. And then we have more relation with our telephone. It's like, you're married with your telephone or what? It's like, it's surrealist. Like we go to bed, oh, someone have write me? And I think in the end, it's the time to heal of this. It's maybe can be a great idea to be a therapy of this. We need to be always connect. Why we need to be always connect with this anxiety, this growth, the anxiety. We are not sleeping. We are always waiting for something, whether we can lose something. Oh, you have lost something. And I think it's a time we need to change something. We need to be more present here and now. We need to practice. Well, this is the great thing from Buddhists, you know. They have this to try to be here and now and don't think. And they make of their body a temple. And then you say, wow, you can learn things. You can always be learning things. To be here and now. To be more present. Be more present with your kids. Be more present with your partner. Be more present with your parents, with your friends. Be more present with yourself.
Thank you so much, everyone. I quickly want to highlight, we produced a book on the occasion of the exhibition. It's available here in our bookstore. Thank you so much all for coming, for your attention. Thank you. Thank everyone who was involved in this evening, and thank you, Andrea.